Right after I transferred the house to my daughter, she screamed in my face, "Get out of here, Mom." I thought I had lost everything, but the truth is, things were far more complicated than she realized. Before I dive into the full story, leave a comment below. Who knows? Maybe my story was once someone else's too. I'm Carol, 68, this past March. Widow for almost 10 years. I work down at Rose's Fabric Corner, though folks around here just call it the fabric shop. I guess I'm part sales lady, part therapist, part historian. People come in looking for thread and leave behind stories that stick to the walls like dust. Some you can brush off. Some stay Elmridges, not on any big map. You gotta want to get here. We're the kind of place where if your screen door squeaks, your neighbor'll bring over a can of oil before you've even noticed. Where the girl at the diner already started your coffee 'cause she saw your car pull in. Where we still remember who painted the mural at the post office. And when the bakery's right after I transferred the house to my daughter, she screamed in my face, "Get out of here, Mom." I thought I had lost everything, but the truth is, things were far more complicated than she realized. Before I dive into the full story, leave a comment below. Who knows? Maybe my story was once someone else's too. I'm Carol, 68, this past March. Widow for almost 10 years. I work down at Rose's Fabric Corner, though folks around here just call it the fabric shop. I guess I'm part sales lady, part therapist, part historian. People come in looking for thread and leave behind stories that stick to the walls like dust. Some you can brush off. Some stay Elmridges, not on any big map. You gotta want to get here. We're the kind of place where if your screen door squeaks, your neighbor'll bring over a can of oil before you've even noticed. Where the girl at the diner already started your coffee 'cause she saw your car pull in. Where we still remember who painted the mural at the post office. And when the bakery's oven caught fire that one Christmas Eve. This town's got memory. Like an old woman. And that's maybe why I've stayed. My Harold, God, I missed that man. Died the kind of death that tricks you into thinking it ain't real. He was changing the oil in the Buick out front. Said he'd be in for iced tea in 10. I found him on his back, eyes shut, a little smudge of grease still on his chin. Just gone. No noise, no cry. Just like he took a breath in and never let it out. Me, I've been holding mine ever since. I've got 2 girls. Megan's my oldest, practical as a hammer, and just as hard-headed. She's a regional manager at some tech company, always flying, always fixing. She pays the bills, makes the calls, organizes my pills into neat little boxes. I think she loves me in spreadsheets. Then there's Brooke, my baby. Always was a dreamy thing. Used to cry when the moon was too full or when her favorite book ended. Life's been harder on her. Picked the wrong men, trusted the wrong voices, tried too many times to start over. Ended up back in Elmridge with a suitcase and a little boy who looked more like her than anyone should at 5. That little boy, Ralph, is my morning sun. He's got those quiet eyes, like he's already lived 2 lifetimes. Loves books, hates broccoli, builds airplanes out of junk mail and pipe cleaners. Calls me Nana Carol in a voice that makes my knees soft. He's the reason I open the blinds each morning. He's the reason I still buy milk. After Harold died, there were days I didn't get out of bed. I'd stare at the ceiling and wonder what the hell I was supposed to do now. Be a sad old lady, knit scarves for invisible grandkids. But then Ralph would come in, crawl under the blanket, and say, "Nana, the sun came back," and damned if I didn't believe him. I work 5 days a week at the shop. I don't need the money, not really, but I need the rhythm, the hum of life, the women who come in with their stories, some funny, some hard. That one girl, Tessa, she's sewing a quilt from her mother's old dresses, said every stitch is a memory. I told her, then be careful with the needle, memories prick. Every now and then someone asks me how I'm doing. I smile and say, "Mom's still fine." That's what Megan wants to hear when she calls. It's what Brooke needs to believe when she leaves Ralph with me to go to another job interview that probably won't pan out. It's what I tell myself at night when I roll over to Harold's side of the bed and find it cold. But the truth is, I don't really know what fine means anymore. Last Thursday, I burned the stew 'cause I was thinking about the old Christmas when Harold made that turkey and forgot to take the giblets out. He laughed so hard he dropped the carving knife. We ate ham sandwiches that year. I still have the photo, him with that stupid holiday tie, holding up a ham slice like it was a trophy. It still makes me smile. It still makes me ache. Megan says I should see a grief counselor. I told her I don't have time to be sad on someone else's schedule. That's not entirely true. The real reason is, I don't want someone to tell me how to move on. Moving on feels like leaving him behind. I'm not ready for that. And Brooke, well, she's trying. She works odd jobs, cleaning houses, stocking shelves, but I see the way her hands tremble when she counts change. I see the fear in her eyes when bills pile up. I do what I can. I cook, I clean, I keep things stable so she can at least pretend she's got something steady under her feet. Then there's Ralph, building his little paper planes, asking me things like, Nana, do you think Grandpa can see me from heaven? I tell him, I think he watches you every single day. And I mean it. I feel Harold sometimes. When the wind shifts, she stood there, jacket zipped up to her chin, no makeup, hair pulled back like she hadn't looked in a mirror. What hit me hardest, though, was who wasn't with her. Ralph. No little arms flung around my waist, no smell of crayons and peanut butter, just Brooke, alone, clutching her purse like it was about to fall apart in her hands. Hey mama, she said, voice soft, eyes everywhere but on me. I knew something was wrong before she sat down. I could tell by the way her knees bounced and the way her lips pressed into a line like she was keeping words from spilling. I didn't say anything right away. I just locked the door, flipped the sign to Bockington, and walked her to the back room. When we sat down, she exhaled like she'd been holding something heavy inside her chest. Mama, I didn't know where else to go. I didn't speak. I just nodded. I've learned over the years with Brooke that silence can be softer than any hug. She took a shaky breath and began. The apartment, my place, it flooded. Some pipe burst upstairs, water everywhere. We're okay, Ralph and me. We weren't home, but now we gotta move, fast. I blinked. She looked at me then, really looked, those big brown eyes still filled with that same hurt from when she was 10 and lost her first dog, my baby girl, 33 years old. But when she's like this, she's still that child who cried when her favorite doll's arm snapped off. Where's Ralph now? I asked gently. With a friend. I didn't want to bring him into this yet. I didn't want him to see me like this. I nodded again. I found another place, she said, voice picking up, rushing like she had to get the words out before they choked her. It's small, but clean. Good school nearby. They want first, last, and deposit up front. Almost $3,000. Her voice cracked. I don't have it, Mama. And I can't get approved for a loan, not with my history. I didn't respond right away. My hands were in my lap, fingers folded tight. I stared at the grain of the table. I could hear my own heartbeat, steady and heavy like it was judging me. Because this wasn't the first time, not even the fifth. There was the time her car broke down, $1,500. She promised to pay me back. Then the winter her electricity got shut off, the prescription she couldn't fill, the childcare she couldn't cover. Each time, it was a little crisis, and each time I told myself, she's trying, just help her this once. Each time, I never saw a dime returned. I told myself it wasn't about the money, and it wasn't, not really. It was about the weight, the fear that I was holding her up so much, she'd never learn how to stand on her own. But what do you do when it's your child? When her voice breaks and her hands shake and she says, Mama, please. I know I've asked before, she whispered, and I know I messed things up, but this time, I swear to you, I'll make it right. I just need this chance. I looked at her then, really looked, and I saw everything at once. The little girl who used to sing herself to sleep, the teenager who cried through her first heartbreak, the young mother who handed me Ralph with trembling arms and begged me to help. I wanted to say, no. I wanted to say, Brooke, you need to figure it out. You need to fail, really fail, and find your own way back up. I wanted to teach her something. But love doesn't always make room for lessons. I reached for my checkbook. My hand shook as I wrote the numbers. Not from the money. God knows I've lived simple enough to save a little here and there. It wasn't about the dollars. It was knowing I was buying another wound. That when this fell apart, and deep down, I knew it might, I'd be the one patching her heart back together again. And mine. She took the check with both hands, her eyes full of tears. She said, Mama, I promise I'll pay you back. I smiled, but it didn't reach my eyes. Just make sure Ralph is okay. She nodded, hugged me quick and tight, like she was afraid I'd pull away. Then she was gone. The door clicked shut behind her, and the room felt colder. I sat there a long time, staring at the checkbook still open, my name shaky where I'd signed. I felt hollow, Not because I gave something away, but because I knew I'd done it again, given her a lifeline that might only stretch the fall. People talk about unconditional love like it's this beautiful, endless thing, but they don't talk about the cost. How it bleeds you slow. How it feels like stitching a hole with thread, made of hope, and hope frays easy. That night, I didn't sleep much. I made tea, I didn't drink. I stared out the window and watched the shadows shift on the wall. I prayed. Not the kind of prayer you find in church pews, but the kind you whisper into the dark. The kind you don't expect answers from. Please, let this be the last time. Please let her stand. Please let my heart not break wide open if she falls again. When Ralph came back the next morning, he ran in like a storm of light, hugged me hard, told me his mom said they were getting a new place and he could paint his room blue. I kissed his hair and said, "That sounds wonderful, baby." But in my chest, something twisted. Because I'd heard promises before. And every time I let myself believe, that night I didn't sleep. I lay in bed with the old quilt pulled up to my chin, the ceiling fan spinning slow above me, making that soft worry sound that reminded me of Harold's snoring in the last years before he passed. I turned to look at the wall beside my bed, the one with the photo frames, Harold and the girls when they were small, all smiles and scraped knees. One from Megan's high school graduation, Brooke holding the family cat, and one of Ralph, 6 months old, chubby cheeks, and a little knitted hat I made for him. My eyes settled on Harold's picture. He looked the same in every photo, calm steady, a little amused at the world like he knew something the rest of us didn't. I touched the glass. I missed the way he'd hold my hand and say, "We'll figure it out." But this I had to figure on my own. Ralph, that boys had more fresh starts than most kids his age have backpacks, new schools, new apartments, different babysitters. Brooke's tried. I won't say she hasn't, but trying and succeeding aren't always the same thing. What does it do to a boy, moving every few months? Having to make new friends, never keeping old ones long enough to remember their birthdays. What does it do to him when he hears his mama crying behind the bathroom door? Or when he has to eat toast for dinner 3 nights in a row? I've done what I can. Hot meals, sleepovers at Nana's, bedtime stories when his mama's too tired, but I'm not going to be around forever. That thought stuck to me like a burr in a wool sock. The house, my house. The one Harold and I bought in 1979. Yellow paint that peels at the edges now. Shutters he installed himself. One window still sticks in the summer. The same kitchen where I taught both girls how to crack eggs without shells. The same porch swing where Ralph first said, "I love you more than peanut butter." It ain't just a house. It's the only place Ralph's ever really felt safe. And I started thinking, maybe it's time to stop patching holes in Brooke's life and start giving her something solid. Not a check, not a ride. Something that roots her, something that roots him. So the next morning, I called Jackson. He's been our family lawyer for over 30 years. Knew Harold well, knew what I'd been through. I asked for an appointment. He squeezed me in that afternoon. His office smells like old books and lemon polish, the same wooden desk, same glass candy jar with those striped mints nobody really likes. He looked up from his papers when I came in and said, "Carol, haven't seen you in a while." I got straight to it. I want to put the house in Brooke's name, but I want to keep the right to live there for the rest of my life. He blinked, then leaned back in his chair. "You sure?" I nodded, even though my hands were twisting the strap of my purse. "It's for Ralph. That boy deserves a home that no one can take away." Jackson sighed, pulled his glasses off. "Look, legally, it's doable. We can file a quitclaim deed with a life estate clause. It means you still have full rights to live there until you pass." One look at her face, those wide, teary eyes, the way she pressed the pendant to her chest, and I'd decided it was worth every penny. "Mom, you're the best ever," she'd screamed, leaping into my good shoulder so hard I almost ripped the stitches. I can still feel that hug, its wild urgency. Back then, she loved without calculation, the way kids love before the world sticks price tags on every feeling. I traced the photo with 2 fingers, then let my hand drop. Where did that child go? The one who screamed with joy just because I showed up. I leaned against the dresser, album heavy on my lap, and let the timeline roll forward in my head. Middle school sarcasm, high school eye rolls, college phone calls that grew shorter and shorter, until our talks were mostly about bills and logistics. But the real shift, I think, Happened 3 years ago when Lenora landed that marketing job to States. She learned how to turn every conversation into a negotiation. Numbers, metrics, leverage. Somehow kindness got reclassified as weakness, tenderness as poor branding. I can't blame the company alone. The world itself is louder, sharper. People laugh at compassion like it's a punchline. Lenora only adapted faster than most. But still, there's a difference between toughening your skin and letting your heart ask. I pressed the album shut and slid it back into its dust groove. In the mirror, the woman staring back wasn't just hurt. She looked complicit. I shaped her. I thought, yet never showed her how to soften without shattering. I saw every time I'd surrendered the argument to keep the peace. Every "it's fine, honey" that hid the truth of my exhaustion. Every birthday where I played caterer instead of guest so nobody noticed I was alone at my own child's party. I lowered myself to the edge of the bed, elbows on thighs. The joints creaked like settling floorboards. You feared losing her so much you gave her permission to lose you, a quiet voice inside whispered. And that voice, impossible to ignore after the pool, after the kitchen, asked the most brutal question of all. Who exactly have you become while trying not to be a burden? I sat for a long time, listening to the air conditioner kick on, then off, as if it, too, was thinking. Memories kept crawling out of corners. The first time Lenora cursed at me, and I pretended it was teenage hormones. The night she borrowed the car, dented the bumper, and I swallowed my lecture because I couldn't bear her silent treatment. The afternoon, I skipped physical therapy to drive 6 hours and assemble her IKEA shelving because she was too busy to read instructions. Each compromise felt tiny in the moment. Collect them in a pile and they weigh as much as regret. At some point I realized my hands were clenched so tight the scar on my surgery shoulder throbbed. I flexed my fingers, forced them to open. This room felt different, denser, like gravity had inched up a notch. I stood, crossed to the closet, and pulled down the fire-safe lockbox where I keep anything that still holds monetary value. Inside was a small velvet pouch, Lenora's emerald necklace. She'd left it behind last year, said emerald wasn't trending, and asked if I wanted it back. Funny how easily we trade memories for trends. I laid the necklace on the nightstand, stone glinting under the lamp. I had pawned bigger things before, my mother's china set, my husband's watch, to patch cracks in the family budget. But I couldn't pawn this. It meant too much, even tarnished by neglect. I slipped the chain around my neck. The gem rested at the center of my collarbone, a cold, sharp reminder. I studied myself again. Same tangled hair, same bruised knees. But the emerald caught the light and threw it sideways, like a rebellious spark. In that glint I saw a decision forming, slow but solid. The world had taught my daughter cruelty. I could not unteach it in a day. But I could stop rehearsing the role of expendable parent. I could reclaim the space I kept shrinking out of politeness. I could speak full sentences that didn't end in apology. I took out a notepad, yellow legal, edges curled, and began listing boundaries the way doctors list prescriptions. I will not clean up after the cookout tomorrow. I will not loan money for the Santa Paloma trip. I will schedule my own vacation, somewhere quiet, during their beach week. I will see a therapist about this grief that walks around disguised as anger. I will invite friends over for poker night next Friday, even if it clashes with their plans. I paused, then added a sixth. If respect doesn't return to this house, I will leave it. I underlined that twice, the pen cutting so deep it embossed the page below. Outside, a lawnmower droned down the block, its engine steady and indifferent. Normal life kept grinding on, unaware of any revelations happening behind second-floor blinds. That was fine. Not every revolution needed an audience. I placed the list on top of the photo album, past and future stacked together, then drew a long breath. The emerald heart felt warmer now against my skin. Maybe temperature, maybe symbolism. Either way, it steadied me. Downstairs, cabinet doors slammed, Clint rummaging for late-night snacks. Lenora's laugh floated up the stairwell. I used to chase that sound like a pilgrim chasing bells. Tonight it drifted past me like elevator music in a building where I didn't rent a floor. I unlocked the bedroom door, stepped into the hallway, and flicked off the light behind me. Shadows stretched long, but I walked through them tall, one hand brushing the necklace as if to prove solidity. Love, I realized, is only holy when it lives side by side with self-worth. And worth, like any muscle, withers when it goes unused. Mine had been asleep, not dead. I headed for the laundry room to throw my soaked dress in the wash. Tomorrow I'd wake early, brew coffee just for myself, and see how the house sounded when I stopped ghosting my own life. The floorboards sighed beneath my feet, ancient and forgiving. Somewhere inside that sigh, I swear I heard the smallest of applauses, maybe from the woman I used to be, relieved to know she still had some fight left. And for the first time since the push, the ache in my chest loosened just enough to let in a thread of something that felt dangerously close to peace. Morning light leaked through the blinds in thin, golden stripes, landing on the kitchen floor like a faded barcode. The house was finally quiet. Lenora had rushed out before 7, carrying her laptop bag and the sweet toxic perfume of expensive hairspray. Clint followed soon after, still chewing toast, never once meeting my eyes. Their cars coughed down the driveway, and the silence that settled felt too clean, like a hotel room after checkout. At 8 o'clock sharp, 3 crisp knocks rattled the front door. No doorbell, never the doorbell. I wiped muffin crumbs from the counter, tucked a stray gray curl behind my ear, and opened up. There she was, Opal Bennington, 34 years of friendship etched into her crow's feet smile. She balanced 2 travel mugs in a cardboard carrier, and a brown paper bag that smelled of cinnamon and butter. Her lipstick, always the same soft raisin shade, was already smudged from the steam. "Morning, kid," she said, calling me what she's called me since I was 30 and thought 50 was ancient. I stepped aside, and she breezed in, humming a Hank Williams tune off-key. If maybe I'd given so much of myself away that there wasn't anything left to hold on to. I didn't pack much. Just the small brown suitcase Harold used to take on fishing trips, the one that squeaks a little when the zipper curves around, the top, a few blouses, some underthings, my night cream, my Bible, the photo of Ralph I kept on my nightstand, him in that Superman costume, 3 years old and fearless. I left everything else. I walked out the front door of my own home without locking it, because it wasn't mine anymore. I wish I could tell you Brooke kicked me out in a storm of shouting and slamming doors. I wish I had a dramatic story, but it wasn't like that. It was a smile, a cold, practiced smile, with her arms folded and her head tilted just so. She'd invited me to sit down earlier that day, made tea, even, said she wanted to talk about the next steps. I should have known right then. "Mom," she said, stirring honey into her cup, not looking at me, "I think it would be best for everyone if you found a different place to stay." I blinked. "I mean, with you having your life, estate rights and all, it's a little complicated, legally, but if you just left on your own, it'd make the transition smoother." "The transition to what?" I asked, my voice so quiet I barely recognized it. She set the spoon down, clicked it against the saucer. "I've had a great offer. The market's hot, Mom. You wouldn't believe what this place is worth now." I felt my breath catch. "You're selling." "It's my house," she said plainly, like stating the weather. "I told you what this could do for Ralph and me." "And what about me?" She finally looked up. Something flickered in her eyes, something tired, maybe even annoyed. "You'll land on your feet, Mom. You always do." And then, like it was nothing, she added, "I can give you a week, but the realtor needs the place clear for photos after that." When I didn't say anything, she stood and said, "I'll be out most of today, so if you want to start getting your things." She walked away. No argument, no fight, just a gentle shove out the door wrapped in tea and pleasantries. That's what broke me. I didn't know where else to go. I didn't have the pride to go to a hotel, and so, like an old dog wounded in a quiet corner, I found myself standing outside Megan's house just after dark. Same white porch swing, same perfectly clipped bushes. I hadn't told her anything. I couldn't. Part of me still wanted to shield Brooke, part of me still couldn't believe it was real. I stood there with my suitcase in hand, staring at the front door. I didn't ring the bell. I didn't even raise my hand. I just stood. Then the porch light flicked on. The door opened. Megan stood there holding a trash bag, wearing her house slippers and a college sweatshirt I hadn't seen in years. She looked at me like she'd seen a ghost. "Mama," and right there, on her porch, in the middle of a suburban street with blooming dogwoods and porch lights twinkling like stars, I collapsed. I don't remember how I started crying, only that, once it began, I couldn't stop. It wasn't graceful. It wasn't like the movies. I sank to my knees, suitcase still in hand, and let out a sound I didn't know I was capable of making. Raw, ugly, years of holding things in, all cracking open at once. Megan dropped the bag and ran to me. Her arms were around me before I could even breathe. "Mama, what happened? What's going on?" She led me inside, straight past the entryway, past the kitchen, past the neatly organized hallway. She barked something to the housekeeper. I barely heard it. Then she wrapped me in a throw blanket and set me down on the couch. I told her everything. It took hours. I told her about Jackson's office, the deed, the hope I'd clung to, the night I roasted the chicken, the man in the living room, the phone call, Brooke's words, her final words before I left. MD, CCT sigh. Megan's face hardened with each sentence. Her jaw clenched. When I finally finished, she stood. "She's a goddamn monster." I shook my head. "She's broken." And I let her stay broken too long. Megan didn't respond. She left the room. I heard her whisper something to the housekeeper, set up the guest room. "Mom's staying indefinitely." When she came back, her eyes were red, but her voice was firm. "You're not going back there. Not ever." I didn't argue. I didn't want to. I just felt ... empty. Not sad. Not angry. Just like someone had taken everything I'd stored in myself. Every dream, every memory, every ounce of faith, and poured it all into a cracked jar that couldn't hold a damn thing. That night, I lay in Megan's guest room, queen bed with high, thread count sheets, air purifier, humming quietly in the corner, framed art of abstract landscapes. No creaky fan, no smell of Harold's aftershave, no laughter from the hallway, no Ralph, just silence, a clean, perfect silence. I stared at the ceiling and felt like I was floating above my own life, like a stranger in a stranger's house. The bed was too soft, the air too filtered, my heart too loud. I thought of Ralph. I didn't know what Brooke had told him. Maybe nothing. Maybe she told him I was traveling or visiting friends. Maybe he asked where Nana Carol went and she just said, "She'll be back." But I wasn't coming back. Not to that house. Not as a mother who would ever believe blindly again. I turned on my side, clutched the small photo of him I kept in my nightstand drawer, and whispered the only prayer I could manage. "Please let him be okay. Please let him know I didn't leave him. Please let him remember." I tried. Then I closed my eyes and waited for sleep to come. But it didn't. Only the faint sound of Megan in the kitchen, washing the dishes I'd never dirtied. The next morning at Megan's place, I woke up to the smell of fresh coffee and the soft clang of wind chimes outside her kitchen window. It should have been comforting. It wasn't. It just reminded me that I wasn't home. The room I slept in was quiet, too clean, the bed too neatly made when I sat up, as if even sleep had been careful not to rumple anything. Megan had a note on the bedside table. "Coffee's hot. I made toast. Call me if you need anything. M." I read it twice, folded it once, and slipped it into my pocket without knowing why. Downstairs, her home buzzed with that early morning suburban rhythm. NPR, low on the radio, dishes being stacked away, a neighbor walking their dog past the window. The world moved on, but I hadn't caught up yet. I sipped the coffee. Dark roast, strong, just how Harold used to take it. And I sat there, watching the steam curl up, thinking, is this where I live now? Or am I just visiting my own life from the outside? By afternoon, the phone calls started. Small town news moves like wind through cornfields. You don't have to shout for folks to hear it. "Carol, honey, are you okay?" Mrs. Tillman from the post office asked. "Is it true what I heard?" Mr. Denton from the diner whispered. Even Dot from the beauty salon cornered me with a tight hug and a too-sweet voice. "People are saying Brooke put you out. That can't be right, can it?" I didn't deny it. I just nodded, smiled faintly, and said, "Well, you know how stories go." But the stories weren't wrong. At work, back at Rose's fabric corner, I tried to keep my head down. I cut fabric, restocked pins, helped Mrs. Landry match patterns for her sofa pillows. But I could feel the looks, pity, confusion, maybe even a little quiet outrage. Someone once said sympathy smells like stale perfume, heavy, cloying, and you can't wash it off. It was a Tuesday, just after lunch, when the call came. It was the principal from Ralph's school. "Mrs. M, I'm sorry to bother you, but Ralph won't leave. He says he won't go home unless you're the one who picks him up." I dropped everything, didn't even take off my work apron. Megan was at some conference out of town, so I grabbed my coat and drove over myself. There he was, sitting on the steps of the main office, little backpack clutched in his lap like a life vest. When he saw me, his whole body relaxed. "Nana," he said, his voice small, tight, I want to go with you. Behind him, Brooke stood near the fence, disheveled, pale, exhausted. Her eyes locked on mine as I approached. We didn't speak at first, just watched Ralph climb into my arms like he was trying to crawl into the past. I held him, kissed his temple, whispered, "It's okay, babe." When I looked back up, Brooke was walking over. Her mouth was set, her pace tight. "What did you say to him?" she snapped. I blinked. What did you say to make him think he could just walk out on me?" I handed Ralph his juice box from my purse, then met her glare. "I didn't say anything, Brooke. You did, when you looked me in the eye and told me to leave my own home. He saw, he heard. Kids aren't blind. You're turning him against me." "No," I said, calmly, firmly. "You did that when you chose money over family. When you brought a stranger into the house before asking your son where he felt safe." She looked away for a moment, jaw clenched, breathing sharp. "You always twist things," she hissed. "I don't have to twist the truth, Brooke. It twists on its own when you lie to yourself long enough." Silence. For the first time in my life, we stood not as mother and daughter, but as two women, broken by different things, staring at the mess they made. She turned on her heel, muttered something about calling me later, and walked off. Ralph held my hand the whole way home, said nothing, just kept his fingers curled around mine like they were made for each other. That night, after I'd put him to bed in Megan's guest room, Megan came home with a look on her face I hadn't seen since the funeral. She sat across from me in her kitchen and said, "You're not going to believe this." I braced myself. "Gordon, Brooke Spire," he pulled out. My heart skipped. He called Jackson directly, said he read about everything in the community Facebook group. His words were, "I'm not buying a house from a woman who kicked her mother out onto the street." I didn't say anything. I didn't feel happy. I didn't feel vindicated. I just felt tired. Megan poured us both a glass of water, then continued, "That's not all. Alexander called me." I frowned. "Ralph's father?" She nodded. "Apparently someone sent him the story. He wants to talk about taking custody." I stared into my glass. "And you?" "I told him to talk to you first. He says Ralph needs stability. Someone who won't throw him from place to place. He wants to raise him." My stomach twisted. I never liked Alexander much. He ran too easy from responsibility. Always had, but maybe now. Maybe he was ready. Or maybe he just saw a chance to swoop in when Brooke was at her lowest. I didn't know what to feel. I just sat there, in that quiet kitchen, watching the light flicker above the stove. All I could think was, the house didn't sell. The buyer walked. My daughter is unraveling. My grandson is lost. And I'm still standing here, holding pieces I never broke. It was Megan who found out first. She's always the one with the paperwork, the passwords, the neat folders labeled with color-coded tabs. She came home early from work one Tuesday, shoulders stiff, lips tight, face white like she'd seen something awful. I was folding Ralph's socks on the couch. He was humming to himself in the kitchen, eating dry cereal with his fingers. Megan walked straight past him and handed me a sheet of paper. Brooke tried to take a loan against the house. My hands stopped moving. The socks slipped into my lap. "She can't," I said quietly. "I still have a life estate." She tried. "Mom, the bank turned her down because your name's still technically attached for life occupancy." But she walked into a damn bank with a copy of the deed and tried to mortgage it anyway. I didn't say anything. She waited. When I didn't react, she slammed the folder shut and said, "Mom, say something." But what was left to say? There's a kind of silence that isn't just lack of sound. It's the kind that feels like something died and no one remembered to bury it. I didn't cry. I didn't yell. I just sat there, the paper still in my lap, and stared at a corner of the rug where a bit of cereal had fallen. I could hear Ralph upstairs now, talking to himself about dragons. I wasn't shocked. Not really. By this point, I think I'd run out of new ways to be hurt. Brooke showed up the next evening. Didn't call. Didn't knock. Megan and I were eating in silence when the doorbell rang. Ralph was already asleep upstairs. Megan opened the door and froze. Brooke stood there in the porch light, looking like she hadn't slept in days. Hair a mess, eyes swollen, arms wrapped around herself like she was trying to hold her ribs together. "Mama," she whispered, her voice cracking. "Please." I stood slowly and walked to the door. She dropped to her knees before I could reach her. "I'm losing him. Ralph, he's going to Alexander. I lost my job. I'm behind on rent. The bank said no. I'm scared. Mama, I don't know what to do. I don't have anyone left. Please, help me." Her face was wet with tears. The kind of crying that makes your whole body shake. The kind you don't fake. I kneeled beside her, slowly, letting my knees scream as they bent. I touched her shoulder, and she collapsed against me. Megan was still at the doorway. Her eyes didn't soften. Brooke looked up at her. "You hate me, I know, but I need Mama right now. You always had her strong. I only ever had her soft." That was when the yelling started. Megan's voice rose like thunder breaking over dry earth. "You think I had it easy. You think I didn't want softness too. You think being the one who never asked for help meant I didn't need any." Brooke stood, wiping her eyes. "You always judged me. Every time I failed, you stood taller, like you were proud to be the good one, because someone had to be," Megan snapped. "Mama was too busy bailing you out of every mess to notice I was drowning too." I stepped between them, palms raised. "Mama always forgave you," Megan spat, quieter now, but shaking. "She let you come back over and over again. But me, I had to be perfect. Strong, reliable. I had to clean up after you and pretend I wasn't mad. But I was mad." Brooke's voice cracked again. "I never felt forgiven. I felt pitied. I felt like the broken one. The messy one. The one no one expected anything from. You don't know what it's like to be the disappointment and know it." And then, silence. Not the angry kind. The kind where everyone realizes the truth just landed in the room. I stood there between them, the two girls I raised, and realized I'd built two different kinds of daughters. One out of guilt. One out of pride. One I held too tightly. The other I pushed too far. And somehow, both of them ended up lost in places I didn't see. "I did this," I said softly. "I split my love in two. One half for the one who needed saving. One half for the one I trusted to save herself. But love isn't meant to be divided like that. I'm sorry." Neither of them spoke. Brooke sat down on the floor, arms around her knees. Megan stood still in the kitchen light, eyes glassy but dry. I looked at Brooke. "I can't fix everything, baby. Not this time. But I can stand here. I can hold your hand. I can help you face what's next, if you let me." Then I looked at Megan, and I see you now. All the times you carried weight you didn't put on your shoulders. You deserved more than just my expectations. You deserved comfort too. Something broke open between the three of us that night. Not clean, not tidy, but real. Later, after Brooke had fallen asleep on the couch and Megan had gone upstairs, I sat alone in the kitchen. The tea in my mug had gone cold, untouched. I whispered to the empty room, "Am I still a burden?" I didn't expect an answer. But I think I finally understood the question. Being a mother had never been about being right. It had always been about being there. Even if you're tired. Even when they don't deserve it. Even when you're the one who needs saving. It was a Thursday night, late. The kind of quiet that only comes after midnight when even the wind outside sounds like it's tiptoeing. I was sitting at the little table in Megan's kitchen, nursing a mug of tea I'd already reheated twice, flipping through a photo album I kept tucked in my suitcase, Harold holding Megan as a baby, Brooke's 6th birthday, with frosting on her nose, Ralph, tiny, wrinkled, screaming, in the hospital bassinet. The doorbell rang. I wasn't expecting anyone. Megan was upstairs, lights out since 10. I opened the door slowly. Brooke stood there under the porch light. Her hair was a mess, pulled back in a half-hearted ponytail. She wore a paper-thin coat, and her arms hugged a brown paper bag to her chest. Her eyes were red, not just from crying, but from the kind of crying that leaves you hollow, like the well inside's gone dry. She looked at me and said, voice trembling, "Mama, I don't have anywhere else to go. Can I come in?" I stepped aside without saying a word. She walked in slowly, the bag crinkling in her hands. She set it on the counter. "It's bread," she said softly, "still warm, from the 24-hour bakery." We sat at the table, both our hands wrapped around mugs of tea. The room lit only by the little lamp by the fridge, the one Megan always left on for comfort. Brooke didn't speak for a while. When she finally did, her voice was so small I almost didn't hear it. "I didn't want to sell the house to be rich. I wanted to sell it because I thought maybe, if I could finally do something on my own, then I wouldn't feel like such a failure." I stayed quiet, let her find the rest of the words. "I know it was stupid and selfish. But it wasn't about the money, Mama. It was about the shame. Every time I came back to you, every time you bailed me out, I felt like I was shrinking, like I was disappearing into this story everyone already knew. Brooke, the baby, the burden. I looked at her, my daughter, who I'd held through croup, through scraped knees, through her first heartbreak, and now here she was, a grown woman, still trying to find a version of herself she could live with. I wanted Ralph to look at me and see a mom who could take care of him, she said, wiping at her face, not one who always needed saving. I reached across the table, took her hand. Sweetheart, I said, do you really think your worth depends on a house deed? She opened her mouth, then closed it. A tear rolled down her cheek. I don't know, she whispered. I don't know what I am if I'm not someone's mistake. That broke something in me. Not because she was wrong, but because I'd let her believe that. Over years and years of silence, of fixing things for her instead of helping her fix them herself. We talked until nearly 3 in the morning. Soft, tired voices in the glow of that little kitchen lamp. We didn't solve everything, but we named things that had never been named before. I told her I loved her. I told her I forgave her. And then, I told her the hardest part. I forgive you, Brooke, I said gently, but I'm not moving back. She looked at me, confused. What do you mean? I mean, I can't keep being the answer to every hole you fall into. That doesn't mean I'm walking away. It means I believe you're capable, and it's time you believe it too. She looked hurt for a second. And then something else settled into her face, something I hadn't seen in a long time. Understanding. But what about the house? She asked. I took a slow breath. You can stay there, for now. I've spoken to Jackson. We can put a clause in that allows you temporary residence, as long as you're working toward self-sufficiency. If you stay clean, if you stay employed, if you're raising Ralph with stability. She nodded slowly. No argument, no bargaining. Thank you, she said. You're not a failure, I told her. But you do have to start acting like someone who doesn't expect to fail. She smiled through her tears. It wasn't a big smile, just a flicker, but it was real. Before she left that night, she hugged me, tight. The kind of hug that says, I'm sorry. I see you now, and I hope you'll still see me. The next morning, Megan and I talked. She didn't like the idea of Brooke going back into the house, not yet, but she understood my decision. We agreed it wasn't about trust, it was about hope and boundaries. Later that week, Brooke moved back in. No fanfare, no posts online, just a woman returning home. Not as a daughter running away from failure, but as a mother trying to build something stable from the rubble. I didn't go with her. I stayed at Megan's for a while longer. Ralph called me from the landline that still sat by the old kitchen window. Nana, he said, Mama made grilled cheese all by herself, and she didn't burn it. I laughed. Sounds like progress, I told him. The first time I saw the house after Brooke moved back in, I hardly recognized it, not because the bones had changed. It was still the same little 2-bedroom off Maple Street, with the creaky porch steps and the stubborn kitchen window, but something had shifted. The paint, for one. Gone was that cold, dull gray she'd picked out with the realtor, meant to look modern, she said. Now it wore a soft, warm cream. The kind of color that made the house look like it was exhaling. Harold always said the house would look better in a baked biscuit color, and there it was, his wish, painted right across the siding. It made my chest ache in a way I couldn't name. But this time, it didn't hurt. Ralph came back to live with Brooke 2 weeks after that long night at Megan's. At first, he clung to me like ivy, every visit ending with teary eyes and I want to stay, Nana. But I sat him down, both of us cross-legged on Megan's back porch, and I explained it the way I knew Harold would have wanted me to. Baby, I said, smoothing his hair back, your mama's trying her best now. She's learning, just like you learned to tie your shoes and read chapter books, and the only way to get better is to keep trying, right? He nodded slowly. And guess what? I added. You still get to see me every weekend, every Saturday, same time. I'll even keep your favorite cereal here. That finally made him smile. The chocolate one, of course. And so, a new rhythm began. Monday through Friday, Ralph was back in the yellow house with Brooke. Saturday mornings, Megan dropped him off at her place, and we'd spend the day baking cookies, playing dominoes, and working in the yard. I decided to fix up the garden. It had sat untouched for years, ever since Harold passed. The soil was tired, and weeds had taken over the old apple bed where he used to hum Springsteen and whistle at bluebirds, but I couldn't bear to rip it all out. Instead, I started small. I dug up the wild grass, turned over the dirt, and planted 3 new apple saplings. Ralph helped me bury the roots and watered them. "Bye, he asked as he sprinkled mulch. "Do you think Grandpa Harold would be happy if I took care of the trees for him?" I felt my throat tighten. "He'd be proud as punch, sweetheart." He nodded solemnly. "Then I'll be extra gentle." Every Saturday, we checked on those saplings, measured their growth with a stick we'd marked in inches. It gave Ralph a job, a purpose. And it gave me something to look forward to beyond the ache of everything we'd lost. Megan told me over dinner one night that Brooke had started working at the little bakery near the post office, the same place that makes those cinnamon rolls that smell like heaven and regret. "She's not great at it," Megan said with a smirk, "but she shows up early. Even she needs this," I said, sipping my tea. "Not just the job, the being needed." Megan nodded. "I think it's good for her. She still screws up orders, but the old man who owns the place likes her, says she's got heart." There was a pause before Megan added, more softly, "She's trying." That meant more to me than she knew. Megan's been stopping by the house now and then. Not every day, but enough. She brings Ralph little toys or funny pencils. She gives Brooke a hard time, constructive nagging, she calls it. But I can tell she's rooting for her, even if she doesn't always say it out loud. Once, I caught Megan slipping Brooke a $20 bill when she thought no one was looking. Neither one of them mentioned it, and neither did I sometimes. Forgiveness doesn't come through speeches. It shows up quietly, like a pot left simmering on the stove. Saturdays are my favorite now. Ralph gets dropped off around 10. He bounds up the steps like a whirlwind, drops his backpack, kicks off his shoes without thinking, and hugs me so tight, I nearly lose my balance. We eat cereal and then do whatever he wants. Sometimes we read, sometimes we walk to the library, sometimes we just sit in the backyard and talk about third-grade galaxies, or how unfair it is that gym class happens before lunch. He tells me about school, about a girl named Harper who beats him at chess, about a substitute teacher with weird socks. One Saturday evening, Megan stayed for dinner. I made roast chicken and mashed potatoes. She brought a bottle of cheap red wine and a sarcastic toast. Brooke came too, unannounced. She brought homemade bread from the bakery, shyly handed it over, and said, "I didn't burn this one." We ate together. No big laughs, no long speeches, but the silence didn't feel heavy anymore. It felt like space, breathing room, the kind of quiet you get after a storm has passed and everyone's still learning how to live in the light again. Later that night, after Ralph had fallen asleep with a book on his chest and Brooke had gone back home, Megan helped me wash dishes. She handed me a plate, drying it slowly. "It's better now, isn't it?" I nodded. "Getting there." She paused. "You okay, Mom?" I looked at her, my firstborn, the one I expected too much from and praised too little. And I smiled. "I think I finally am." Some mornings, I still wake up expecting things to be the way they were. Harold in the kitchen, half dancing with the coffee pot. Megan at the table with a serious brow, doing homework. Brooke asleep until noon. Her door covered in glittery stickers and attitude. Those kinds of mornings are long gone now. But lately, something else has been taking their place. A quieter peace. A soft hum of acceptance. Last week, I sat down and wrote a letter. Not to Brooke, not to Megan, not even to Ralph. It was to myself. I wrote, "Forgiveness isn't forgetting. Forgiveness is remembering without bleeding. It's remembering clearly, but not letting it own you. It's setting yourself free without needing to see the other person suffer. Sometimes, that's the loudest revenge you'll ever get, living without bitterness." When I finished it, I folded the paper and slid it into my old recipe box, between Harold's peach cobbler and the chicken pot pie I haven't made in years. Not to hide it, just to know it was there, like a truth I could hold on to when the weight of everything got too loud. Brooke still stumbles. She's not suddenly perfect, and I never asked her to be. Megan says she still gets flustered balancing bills, sometimes forgets Ralph's lunch money, and panics about the future like it's always lurking in the corner. But she's showing up, to work, to school meetings, to herself. One day, Megan called me and said, "Mom, you know she's trying, right?" I said, "I know, because I do. I've lived enough life to understand that effort doesn't always look graceful. Sometimes it's messy, sometimes it's late, but if it's real, you feel it." Brooke and Megan, they're still oil and water. In many ways, but they've learned how to sit at the same table without tipping the glass. At Thanksgiving this year, we had dinner at Megan's house. Brooke brought green beans that were a little too salty. Megan rolled her eyes and ate them anyway. No one raised voices. No one walked out. That might not sound like much, but in this family, that's a miracle. I chose forgiveness, but I didn't choose forgetting. And I didn't go running back into the same patterns. I still love Brooke, but from a firmer place now. A place that doesn't rush in with money or solutions, but with a steady presence. I let Megan relay news when needed. I keep an ear out, a heart open, but I've learned to step back and not rescue. It wasn't easy. Every instinct in me still wants to fold her laundry, to write her a check when rent is tight, to say, "Come home, baby," whenever the world turns sharp. But love isn't always softness. Sometimes it's space. Sometimes it's silence. Sometimes it's letting someone else fall and watching them crawl back up, knowing they can. 2 weeks ago, Ralph came to visit and handed me a folded piece of paper. "Don't read it till I go home," he said, grinning, stuffing a cookie in his mouth. After he left, I sat in my chair and opened it. It was an essay, something for school, a writing assignment titled "Someone I Admire." He wrote, "The person I love the most is my grandma. She is not a superhero, but she knows how to protect our family when it's falling apart. She doesn't shout, she listens. She doesn't fix everything, but she makes it easier to breathe. My grandma is like glue, even when no one notices her." I read that part 3 times, then I cried. Not the broken kind. The kind that clears something out. Last Sunday, I got a letter in the mail from a woman named Clarice Lewis, who runs a community center just outside town. She wrote, "Dear Carol, we heard from one of our members about your story, about your family, about your journey through betrayal, resilience, and healing. We host a class for women over 55 who are starting over. Many of them recently divorced, widowed, or estranged from their children. We'd be honored if you would come speak next month. The topic is family and forgiveness." At first I laughed. What could I say to those women? That I'd made more mistakes than I could count, that I'd loved too hard and let it nearly destroy me, that I forgave before it was asked, and sometimes before it was deserved. But then I realized, maybe that is what they need to hear. Not a neat ending, not a happily ever after, just the truth that healing is crooked, that forgiveness is work, that starting over doesn't always mean starting fresh. Sometimes it means starting from where you broke, picking up what's left, and making something honest with it. I wrote back and said yes. Megan offered to drive me. Brooke said she'd come, if that was okay. I told them both, let's just take it one day at a time. Because that's how all of this works now. Not with perfect days, but with new ones. It's been 1 full year. A year since the day I stood outside Megan's front door, with a suitcase in one hand and a broken heart in the other. A year since I walked away from the house Harold built, the house that once held laughter, and slammed doors and baby footsteps. A year since Brooke looked me in the eye and told me to leave. And now I'm living in that very same house again, but it's not the same dot, and neither am I, people assume. When life falls apart and somehow finds its way back together, that everything must have gone back to the way it used to be. But it doesn't, it shouldn't. The walls of this house still creak the same in winter. The light still hits the kitchen counter just right around 7:30 a.m. The porch swing still groans if you sit too far to the left, but the way I breathe inside it, that's different now. The way I hold my heart here. The way I let go of things I used to carry like badges. Brooke doesn't live here anymore. That surprised everyone. After all the tears, the fights, the trying to make, she came to me quietly one afternoon and said, "Mama, I think it's time I had a space that's mine, just mine." I just nodded. She found a small apartment about 10 minutes away, walking distance. It's not much, a cramped little place above a nail salon with thin walls and a rickety stove, but she pays for it herself with her own money from the bakery. "I'll still visit," she said as she packed her things. "But I think I need to know I can stand on my own, even if I fall sometimes." And I said the only thing that mattered. That's what growing up is, baby. Not staying on your feet. Getting back up. She kissed my cheek before she left. No drama, no door slamming, just a soft, earned goodbye. I no longer run the fabric shop. After 25 years, I handed the keys over to Jenna, Rose's granddaughter, fresh out of business school. Eyes too big for this town, but heart rooted deep in Elmridge soil. I thought I'd miss it more, but I don't. Turns out, the shop taught me how to listen, but this next chapter is teaching me how to speak. These days, I spend my mornings making bread. Not fancy sourdough like you see on TV, just plain white loaves and sweet honey wheat, the kind that make the house smell like Sunday. I plant tomatoes and herbs where Harold's apple trees once stood. The apples died after harsh frost years back, but the earth still remembers how to grow things. Kids from the neighborhood stop by after school. I set up a little art table on the back porch. We paint rocks, sketch trees, sometimes make paper crowns. "You're the nice grandma," one girl told me last week. I smiled and said, "I've had a lot of practice." In the evenings, I walk 2 blocks down to the town center and help teach a class called Second Chances. It's for women over 50, divorced, widowed, tired of being invisible. We read books, we write letters we never send, we laugh, we cry, sometimes all in the same hour. They invited me to speak once. I told them the truth. "Yes," I said, "I'm the lady whose daughter kicked her out of her own home, but now, that same daughter is learning to live on her own. And I learned to live with myself." Some people in town still remember. Small towns have long memories and loud whispers. At the market last week, a woman tapped me on the shoulder. Late 60s, pearls and perfume, the kind who always says too much with too little grace. "Excuse me," she said, "are you the woman, the one whose daughter—" She didn't finish the sentence. She didn't have to. I looked at her, smiled, and said, "Yes, that was me." She blinked, surprised I didn't flinch. "But now," I added, "my daughter lives in her own apartment, pays her own rent, raises her son like a warrior." I'd say that's a happy ending, wouldn't you? She nodded, unsure. But I was sure, because some stories don't end with grand forgiveness or perfect reunions. Some stories just keep going, less dramatic, more steady. Ralph still visits every weekend. He's grown taller, lost a front tooth, draws robots now instead of dinosaurs. One night, he brought home a school assignment. "Write about someone you admire." He picked me. He wrote, "My grandma isn't famous or rich, but she makes people feel safe. She doesn't wear a cape, but she always shows up." I stuck that paper on the fridge with a strawberry magnet. It's still there, right next to a photo of Harold holding Ralph when he was just a baby. Some mornings I sit on the porch with a blanket over my knees and watch the world wake up. The cream-colored siding catches the early sun just right. And I think, life didn't go back to how it was. It just let me come back different. And that's more than enough. Until this very moment. After everything I've been through, I finally have the confidence to say, life doesn't always go the way we want it to, but it always takes us where we need to be. I used to think forgiveness was a gift you give to someone else, but in the end, I've come to understand, forgiveness is the first and final gift you give to yourself. I was hurt by my own flesh and blood. I stood in the house I once called home and felt like a stranger. But I refused to let bitterness gnaw away the rest of my life. I chose to forgive, not because Brooke deserved it, not because I was weak, but because I wanted to live lighter. Don't forget, you can start over at any moment, whether you're 68 or 38 or 18, not by redoing everything, but by moving forward with a lighter heart and a broader vision. And I truly want to ask, if you were in my shoes, pushed out of your own home by the very child you raised, betrayed in silence, what would you do? Would you burn with anger or choose forgiveness? Would you sever every tie, or keep a thread of hope alive? Please leave your thoughts below. Your voice matters.